summary, the court expressed concerns about widespread violations of safeguards on the use of warrantless collections.
Warrantless collections of data, information, unwarranted searches.
The FBI, it seems to me, basically said they had been working on changes, but that had been suspended because of the COVID pandemic protocols. But here's my question, Director Wray. Section 702 was enacted in 2008. The FBI and other intelligence agencies have had more than a decade to implement what the law requires. And yet it's 2021, and the Supreme Court is still finding, this isn't the first time, still finding widespread violations and failures where the FBI uses basically the hook of foreign surveillance, but it's using it to avoid its warrant requirements for domestic law enforcement. Why is this happening?
Well, Congressman, I obviously want to make sure, and I'm fiercely committed to making sure, that the FBI complies with FISA in all respects. The FISA court's concerns are certainly concerns that I take especially seriously as somebody who's a former prosecutor, former defense attorney, former assistant attorney general in charge of the criminal.
This is the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray.
With and our candor with and our transparency with and the confidence that we earn with.
So if you want to contact the FBI, he's the man to contact.
Now, the opinion that you are...
And you can use this video in his own words against him.
Did not, in fact, find abuses or misconduct, and has to deal specifically with the querying, the running of searches in our databases. So we have taken... You
also found that you had used, the FBI had used data for internal domestic investigations. That's a violation.
It sure is.
Of 702.
And we are the people they're violating.
I'm not going to speak to the specific instances in the report because I think that would take longer than we have here, among other things. But I would say that we've done a number of things to try to address the issues identified by the court. We have made significant changes to the documentation requirements to assure accountability, oversight requirements, guidance and training enhancements, systems modifications, which may not sound glamorous, but
Lies.
it's important because it helps prevent non-compliance. And then last but not least, something I particularly want to highlight, I created a whole new department in the FBI, an Office of Internal Auditing, headed by a senior partner from a top, Big Four accounting firm, who also had prior in his life been an FBI agent, and is consulting with a premier outside world-class consulting firm to stand up an Office of Internal Audit specifically focused on FISA to ensure that we have a world-class compliance program and world-class internal auditing program to make sure that we don't have these issues.
The gentlelady's time is expired.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, could we get the director to commit to have this individual brief the committee on those procedures?
I'd be happy to see if we can get the committee a briefing on what we're doing in this space.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow up on my colleague. Apparently Californians think alike today. In the 20 years that I've sat on the dais and looked at report after report of the FBI failure to comply with FISA and its long history of spying on Americans using this legislation as a backdoor.
This is us targeted
We've
individuals.
seen a pattern, which is we're promised there are going to be changes, and those changes have not ever occurred. As the gentlelady who just spoke, Ms. Lofgren would tell you, coming up for reauthorization. If the reauthorization were today, based on, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 2019 report by the Inspector General that found 17 significant errors or omissions and 51 wrong or unsupported factual assertions in Carter Page's domestic spying, if you will, using the FISA statute alone. In addition to that, we have numerous people, including judges, who say if they'd known the truth rather than the false statements, they never would have granted those warrants. So now the question is, Should we, first of all, do you agree with those findings that at least some of those 68 errors or omissions are accurate, including one of your own that was prosecuted for it?
Well, Congressman, first, let me be clear, just in case there's any confusion to anybody watching. Of course, all of these applications were filed before I became FBI director.
I know, and to be honest, Director, the reason we're having this conversation, Ms. Loftman and I both,
This is live, y'all.
That it's your watch. And organizations, no matter how great they are much like airplane pilots. They're not judged on their safe landings, they're judged on their crashes. And this was clearly a crash, wouldn't you say?
Well, what I would say is that the Inspector General's report describes conduct that I consider unacceptable, unrepresentative of who the FBI is, and cannot happen again, which is why I implemented over 40 corrective measures promptly after the Inspector General's report came out, accepted every single finding in the Inspector General's report, implemented every single recommendation in the Inspector General's report, went above and beyond, installed an entirely new leadership team at the FBI, created this new Office of Internal Auditing that I just mentioned to Congressman Lofgren. I can go on and on and on.
Let me not let you go on and on just because of short time and ask you, what assurances can you give us today that a current audit would not find current failures?
Well, as somebody who's worked deeply with auditing firms for all sorts of organizations, the point of an audit is to find
FBI oversight.
So I can't sit here and tell you that no audit would find a problem. That's why we have an auditing problem, is to find the problems and fix them.
The liar. You know he's lying too.
Some time ago, under your predecessor, he came before this Congress and defended a warrant, an unusual one that ordered the company Apple to develop software to allow for a backdoor, purportedly to be on one iPhone used in San Bernardino by a murderer, a terrorist, but in fact they were asking for software that allowed it to be external. Your predecessor claimed that you did not have the technical capability to decipher it. Shortly after that, a college professor showed that for about $300 you could have done it, and yet you paid $1 million to an Israeli firm who did it. Today, can you assure us that you have the tools that you apparently did not have, or would we have to assume that you'd have to ask a professor for a $300 solution or the Israelis for $1 million solution?
Well, as you could imagine, the technology continues to improve both for the bad guys and for the good guys. And so it's not a static situation. But
well, knowing that there have been two recent failures in cyber attacks, what assurances can you give
Failures in cyber attacks.
that you have the resources and a plan to be on the leading edge of cyber rather than the trailing edge of cyber, which appears to be where we are in a number of areas?
We constantly need more resources to get further and further ahead of the bad guys in this particular space. The technology in terms of encryption, which is sort of the point you're getting at with the Apple example, has continued to advance in a way that's actually making it harder and harder for law enforcement, not just the FBI, but all across this country, to get into encrypted devices and certainly encrypted messaging platforms. We saw that, for example, down in Congressman Gates's district in Pensacola with the Naval Air Station attack there. We tried to get into Apple's iPhone, the device that the terrorists there used. And by the way, he took the time in the middle of the attack to shoot the phone. Think about the presence of mind that he has to have in the middle of that to do that, to try to prevent us from getting into his phone. Our folks were able, in that instance, to reconstruct the phone. And because of a fluke in that particular instance, we were able to actually get into the device. But it took months and months and months and hours and hours and hours and hours and lots of taxpayer money to get there. And only then, after not having gotten the cooperation that we really could have used from Apple at the front end, we found out that that particular terrorist had been in communication with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula right on up till the night before the attack, not known at the time that the attack was disrupted. You know, it's an illustration of what a challenge this is for law enforcement. It affects terrorist investigations. It affects an issue that I know is near and dear to every member of this committee, child sexual exploitation investigations. And it's something that I hear about. I've been to talk to law enforcement in all 50 states, and I hear about it from chiefs and sheriffs in every state about this issue. So it is top of mind. We are bringing technical tools, using money that Congress appropriates to us to deal with it.
The gentleman,
We're moving in a direction where we're going darker and darker, so I appreciate very much your concern.
the gentleman's time is well expired. Ms.
Then we're moving in a generation where we're going darker and darker. We know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
We feel your
Thank you
darkness,
for your
FBI.
service and the FBI agents across the nation. Since 2019, the United States has experienced a steep rise in hate crimes. African Americans have been targeted in 48.5% of all hate crimes, while hate incidences targeting Latinx have risen 8.7%. Anti-Semitic hate incidents have risen by 14%, and anti-Asian hate incidents have risen by nearly 150%. Director Wray, my time is short. These questions should give just a brief response. Is the Bureau prioritizing its investigations into violent hate crimes?
Yes, very much so.
Liar.
I can give you more information. It depends on how much you would like here.
You'll have an opportunity. What percentage of domestic terrorism cases investigated by the FBI would you now say are motivated by white supremacist type ideology?
Well, I'm not sure that I could give you a percentage. Certainly on the domestic terrorism side, we have elevated, I did back in summer of 2019, racially motivated violent extremism to our very top threat priority band, consistent with ISIS. And the biggest chunk of that, by far and away, the vast majority of that, is racially motivated violent extremists advocating for the security.
And you would say that's still today?
Yes.
Thank you. Now let's direct our attention to the beating of law enforcement in Washington on January 6th. On January 6th, the domestic terrorists who beat law enforcement officers and breached the citadel of democracy of the United States wore insignias of white supremacist groups, waved Confederate flags, hung a noose on the lawn, and they were shouting racial epithets. As indicated, NYPD sent a packet of raw intelligence concerning potential violence. Why did the FBI not issue a formal threat assessment with all of that information, including an assessment at headquarters?
Well, I don't know about a formal threat assessment. As I was mentioning in response to an earlier question, we did put out quite a number, I think a dozen or so, intelligence products specifically geared towards domestic violent extremism and election-related domestic
On that day?
extremism.
On that day? On January 6th?
Over the course of 20, leading up to and right on up to and including December of the month.
Can I get that in writing as to the details of how that progress and whether there was a threat assessment on that day? I need to move on. I thank you very much. You know that the Norfolk FBI office has indicated that an SIR report, situational information report. These are the words: be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in, and blood from their BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa slave soldiers being spilled. Get violent. Stop calling this a march or a rally or protest. Get ready for war. Would you agree that these words clearly could indicate racial bias and attempt to use race and racism as a potential motive for violence?
Well, I'm not sure I tracked all the words in the quote that you read, but certainly the Norfolk Situational Information Report, the information that was online was concerning enough that it was provided, as I said, within...
It had Black Lives Matter, slave soldiers. That has some racial overtones.
Absolutely, of course.
Let me, as you well know, you just heard me recount the Norfolk NYPD. Was the FBI aware of any online threats to the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, and specific members of Congress connected with January 6th?
Well, I can't think of any sitting here right now. Certainly we were aware of and discussed a lot of online chatter that was out there.
I'm going to move on. Thank you.
I'm not aware of any...
On the day of, did headquarters contact the Vice President? Did they contact the Speaker of the House? And did they contact FBI, contact any member of Congress on the day of January 6th?
Did any member of the FBI have any
Yes.
contact with any member?
Headquarters, I'm going to speak of, your office.
Well, I know that there was interaction between.
I'm going to ask for that in writing as well. Maybe, yes, I thank you. Let me go to the connection of race and the President of the United States, former President. On December 19th, the former President indicated big protest in D.C. on January 6th. There will be wild. 12:15 on January 6th, he said, "You'll never take back our country with weakness." At 1:10 p.m., President Trump said, "We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." At 2:11, rioters breached police lines on the west side of the Capitol. Director Wray, these words do indicate that the former President, Donald Trump, helped motivate the domestic terrorist attack on January 6th. Have any of these words been reviewed to determine whether or not President Trump words and deeds should be referred to the Department of Justice as contributing to the violence of the insurrectionists on January 6th?
Gentlelady's time has expired. The witness may answer the question.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot I can add on that subject, but if there's something I can provide in follow-up, I'm happy to.
I asked if you referred these actions or deeds of the President, you're the investigatory agency, to the Department of Justice. Donald Trump's actions, words, deeds on that day.
I'm not aware of any investigation that specifically goes to that, but we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of investigations related to January 6th involving lots and lots of different pieces of it, and I want to be careful not to speak with.
Well, maybe I can get that back in writing. I thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I might just put on the record for a letter back. There are only 4.7% African Americans in the FBI. Much has come to my attention of the lack of promotion opportunities for leadership in the FBI. And the diversity office that you now have does not report directly to the FBI director. Would you please provide me in writing where we are with diversity in the FBI and it relates to minorities and specifically African Americans?
Gentlelady.
I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Gorman.
Thank you. Director Wray,
Well, there you have it.
we know from the Arizona
So these are the
case,
people that you go
Supreme Court
after.
said that
TIs.
state local law enforcement were not to enforce immigration laws. But isn't it true that local and state law enforcement officers can enforce state and local law if, even if the defendant is
These are the people that we need to go after.
I want to be a little bit careful since the last time I looked at that issue was back in the 2001, 2, 3 range when I was a lawyer at the Justice Department. But
look,
my
my
recollection
time is very short.
My
It's an
recollection
easy
is similar
question.
to yours. My recollection is similar to yours, but I'm
Yes.
not speaking as a lawyer right now.
Okay, it is the case, and I hope you'll refresh your recollection and your legal training. So it seems that since the federal government is welcoming basically by its tactics, by its handling of the massive surge across our border, in such a way to continue to encourage it, that there is massive destruction to landowners' property. It sounds like, understanding the criminal trespass laws of Texas, that perhaps landowners on the border ought to have no trespassing signs, including in Spanish, so that local law enforcement.
Okay, so this doesn't pertain to what they were just discussing about us as targeted individuals. You know, 70 illegal, unwarranted 702 FISA searches, unwarranted, non-consensual experimentation on targeted individuals. That's what you guys need to look up. 702 unwarranted illegal searches, illegal experimentation, illegal data collection by the Federal
Certainly, it's my practice when
the
I
FCC.
as FBI
Just said
director,
FCC.
signing applications.
Federal
So
Communications
I
Commission.
do review them. Yes, absolutely.
I would commend you.
These, the FBI,
And they're not short.
with their 702 searches,
Usually lengthy.
and the FCC are heavily involved. Viacom, they are heavily involved. The cell phone companies, Apple for one,
Actually read those regarding
are
the Trump campaign
involved
before he
in
signed
our
it.
targeting.
The night
These
before
people
January 6th,
are terrorists.
That
Okay.
evening, I was
So,
talking to Capitol Police officers.
prior to this man coming
and I said,
on,
let's face it,
what you were
most
witnessing
conservatives
was them
that come,
discussing
they don't
the
have
unwarranted searches
intention
of
being violent. And they said,
American
well,
citizens,
today that there's a good bit of
globally
activity,
and on the home front right here in America, experiencing domestic terrorism
paraphernalia to try to blend in
by their own government. All right. I just wanted to record that. I just happened to turn to C-SPAN because they have some real stuff on C-SPAN. If you have C-SPAN, you need to watch it. You need to watch it because they address issues that afflict us in the urban communities. Okay, guys, I hope this information was helpful to you. If you plan on following through, this is the man that you need to go after right here.
Well, the answer to that is
He
no,
is
unfortunately.
the
So we've already
director
talked about a little bit here this morning.
of the FBI, and right now they're critiquing them based off of FBI oversight. You know, there's a lot of things being done within the FBI, and they're being called out on it this morning. And this is a live broadcast. This is not previously recorded. It is live, as you can see. Okay, family, God bless you. I hope you have a beautiful day. And I will be back soon with another YouTube video. Peace.